Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So today we're talking about the legalization of marijuana, and I called it "Follow the Money" because there's a lot of money coming with the sale of marijuana, recreational marijuana. Now, legalized marijuana is a $30 billion industry, and it arrived in the Midwest in 2018 after decades of traumatic criminal marijuana laws. How do these new laws repair damage to communities? How does it affect cannabis users? Amendment 3, adopted in November 2022, contained many constitutionally driven deadlines for legal recreational marijuana, including automatic expungements of criminal marijuana offenses, hiring a chief equity officer, Abby, who's with us today, microbusiness targets, educational support, and preference for communities with higher incarceration rates for marijuana offenses. What's unique about us is that voters wrote this initiative, unlike Illinois, where the legislators wrote the laws. So it's different. It's coming out different than, and the last time in March 2022, we spoke with Oklahoma and Illinois marijuana activists. So the Missouri marijuana sales are forecasted to reach $1 billion in 2023. Already in February, it was $71 million in recreational marijuana. So join us for the panelists to discuss Follow the Money, which covers the cannabis business and the normalization of marijuana. So this next slide is, again, it's the Green Party's position. We want to legalize it. We want to legalize federally. It was legalized federally in Canada in 2018. And this is what America looks like. It's a patchwork of, think of it as freedom and incarceration. Here in Missouri, we border 8 states, and only one of them is recreational. And Illinois, they, for $100 worth of marijuana, you'll pay $116 in Missouri, and you'll pay $36 in Illinois. So we cost less based on our taxes than Illinois. So here, just a recap. It was a voter initiative ballot, and we got approved by the Secretary of State. We took out petitions. We got it signed. We did it. We got on the ballot, and it passed by 53.1%. So with that said, I'd like to share the screen with Abby Vivas, the new February 2023 Chief Equity Officer for the Department of Health and Senior Services. Abby.
Okay. All right. I am unmuted. Can everybody hear me?
Mhm.
All right, great. So my name is Abby Vivas, and as she mentioned, I'm the Chief Equity Officer. I come to the Division of Cannabis with a background working in forensic science, and then a brief stint working at a feed laboratory in a regulation field for the Missouri Department of Agriculture. And I'm very excited to be working at DCR. So in the Division of Cannabis, our mission is to provide safe and secure access to cannabis for qualifying Missouri patients and adult consumers. A big portion of what we're looking at is public safety and making sure that the products that people have available to them are safe for consumption. And she's already kind of covered what happened with Amendment 3, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But essentially, we've made marijuana, legal for adults over 21 years of age, within particular limits for purchase and cultivation. And we have now tax revenue to go to a couple different sources as well. So with Amendment 3, a big part of that, like I said, is protecting public health by ensuring that there's a safe product on the market and ensuring the safety and security of those facilities that are producing those products. I was going to spend more time on this, but since you've already covered that, we'll get forward to more of the eligibility. Within that, we did change some things for patients. So they have different purchase limits and possession amounts. And like I said, we have the 6% sales tax on the retail that will go to various programs within the state. So my position was part of this initiative. So what I'm supposed to do by statute and by rule, and what I would really like to do for everyone, is develop some programs to inform the public of the opportunities that exist within our new Section 2. So for people that meet the eligibility criteria set forth for microbusiness licenses, provide public education and assistance for people that have been disproportionately affected by marijuana prohibition. So assisting them with the application process, the licensing process. So once we've issued some licenses, making sure those people have the information and tools at their disposal to be able to be successful. Also, any other resources that DCR can provide or support from other state agencies, just making those easily accessible for the people that do receive a license. And the last kind of just overarching part of my job is to make sure that I provide a report of my activities in the departments in regards to the eligibility criteria. And I'm supposed to provide that to the department, who will pass it on to the legislature and the governor. So providing some accountability for those activities. So our tax revenue is now going to a couple different sources from this. So off the top, 2% goes to DOR for tax revenue. And then whatever our department needs to carry out our responsibilities in regards to adult use. And then the second swath of funding that's going to be taken off will go for the expungement provision that you spoke about, Susan. And then what's remaining is going to be split between the Veterans Commission, the Department of Health and Senior Services for drug addiction treatment grants, and then to the public defender system for low-income eligible Missourians.
Now I'm going to pause you for a minute, Abby, because I reached out to the state attorney, the Attorney General's office, to understand. If you can go back one slide, if you don't mind. So follow the numbers, because we have the businesses of a $1 billion business industry for Missouri. We have automatic expungements, which is incredibly unique. I think we're the only state that got automatic expungements. Illinois is having a terrible time with it. And then number 3, the marijuana offenses. So, okay, so what I'm reading, and again, what the Attorney General's office said to me was, right now they're simply taking comments that the courts handle the expungements, the county courts, the clerks handle the expungements, and the Missouri State Highway Patrol handles publishing the Missouri Offenses Report, the MOR. So and then the courts were saying that their IT systems are antiquated and they needed about $2.5 million to upgrade. So it seems like there's going to be an automatic pipeline of money to the court so they can meet the expungement requirements of Amendment 3. Is that too simplified? Is that too simple?
Well, so I can't speak on that on behalf of DHSS, but so my forensic experience was actually with the Missouri State Highway Patrol in the crime laboratory. And so I do know a little bit about criminal history reporting from that background. And the Missouri state court systems not everything talks to each other. So the Department of Corrections system, the Missouri State Courts, criminal history, not all of those things are linked directly. So I can see where this expungement portion will be challenging to make sure that they get everybody that is eligible for that expungement. The other part is—
I'm sorry, the number is $2.5 million. That's what the courts have asked state lawmakers for, a supplemental budget of $2.5 million to pay for overtime of 500 court clerks statewide to go through the files to identify who's eligible for expungement. And again, the numbers are incredible. They're saying that 567 people who are on parole are eligible for expungement immediately, but there are 9,000 misdemeanor charges filed statewide since January 1, 2020 that resulted in conviction. So I mean, these are big numbers, right?
Mhm.
And okay, so go ahead, you talk.
Well, I just, like I said, from my experience working with criminal histories, working in the crime laboratory in our CODIS unit, I can see where it will be challenging just because my knowledge of how those systems work together or don't work together, and the fact that not all agencies have digitized records. You know, there's a couple sheriff's offices that didn't even get internet until the last like year. So I can see where this will be a difficult piece. And the other part of that is, you know, they wrote that it would be if you had, I believe, three pounds or less, which is not related to a specific charge. So it's not like you go from a class whatever felony to this based on like 3 pounds. So they may have to look through, you know, more than just like a conviction record to find that information. So I can see where this part will be a heavy lift.
Abby, you have 3 more minutes.
Okay. So within our micro businesses that we've now have with adult use, there are 2 different types: a wholesale facility. So these are cultivators and our processors, manufacturers, turning marijuana into different products like gummies, liquids, candies, things like, not candies, but things of that nature. They can grow up to 250 flowering plants at one time. But they may only do business with other micro businesses. So they have all essentially the privileges and rights of a comprehensive, but they can only do business with other micros, and they are more limited on the total number of flowering plants that they can have. Our dispensary facilities for micros would be basically the same, but they also have the same caveat that they can only do business with other micros. So other micro wholesale facilities, dispensaries, they can exchange products, sell products between one another, but only within the micro business license types. And with this, we're going to have a minimum of 144 new businesses that will all be micro businesses. These are going to be allocated over 3 different lotteries in 18 months, and they are allotted by congressional district, the same as the other dispensaries and wholesale facilities. There'll be 6 wholesale and 2 dispensary per district. They have a lower application fee. It will be refunded potentially. They can apply for a refund if they do not are not awarded a license through the lottery process. And also they don't have an annual fee that first year. So the entry into the market is a little bit more reasonable, at least from the regulation side, but they will still have to comply with all of the regulatory requirements as set forth in rule. Generally speaking, in order to apply, majority owners, so those that are over 50%, they have to meet at least one eligibility criteria that's set forth in Section 2, and they cannot be an owner of another existing marijuana facility or medical facility. They can only apply for 1 micro business license. That's 1 per person. So you have 1 shot when you put your application in to be awarded a license in the lottery. And the lottery drawing, we issued a press release last week that Missouri Lottery will be conducting that for us. So within the eligibility, we have a couple different ways that people can meet that to apply. If they have a net worth of less than $250,000 and an income below 250% of the poverty level in 3 of the last 10 years. A valid service-connected disability as determined by the Department of Veterans Affairs, or a person who either themselves or a parent, guardian, or spouse has been arrested, prosecuted, or convicted for a nonviolent marijuana offense. The exceptions for that would be the minor, providing to a minor, or driving while intoxicated. This kind of relates to what we were just talking about too with this expungement piece. I know some people have some concerns that maybe their records wouldn't be available, but even if it's been expunged, they can get documentation of that expungement to show that they did have an arrest or a prosecution for that.
Okay, Abby, have about 30 more seconds.
Okay. The other things, they can reside in a zip code where 30% or more of the population is below poverty level, or the rate of unemployment is 50% higher than the state average, or the historic rate of incarceration for marijuana related offenses is 50% higher than the rest of the state. We will be providing zip codes for that particular one for the incarceration. That is not data that's just readily publicly available. So I've been working with the Highway Patrol Criminal Justice Information System Unit in order to pull some of that data so that we can develop those for the zip codes in Missouri so that people don't have to try and do that legwork. And then the last one is they either graduated from an unaccredited school district or they've lived in a zip code that has an unaccredited school district for 3 of the past 5 years. So right now, the next deadline that we have is June 6th. The application forms and instructions will be available on our website. I'm hoping that we have even more type of guidance put out before that point, especially for those eligibility criteria, so people can start looking at that and gathering their documentation. We'll be accepting applications for 2 weeks, starting July 27th. Our lottery drawing will occur between it's going to occur before probably the end of August. Then we're going to start awarding licenses between October 2nd and 4th. By Constitution, we have to have them awarded by October 4th. And then there'll be a review
So you wait till the
process.
second to start?
Excuse me?
You're gonna wait till the second to start?
They're all going to be awarded at one time. So whoever
Okay,
wins
okay.
through the lottery drawing will notify everybody at the same time. And then we'll perform a minimum standards and eligibility review to make sure people, actually are meeting those requirements. And then, so moving forward, we've met a lot of these deadlines, some of them early. And so we also hope to do some other things early. So we're accepting applications before we needed to. So June 6th, as I said, instructions are going to be available. We'll start accepting applications. So that will just be for the first round. So 48 licenses will be issued the first go round. And then next June is when we'll start accepting applications for the second round. And then March of 25 for the third and final round, at least by Constitution. And those will also be awarded by license.
Time's up.
Nailed
Thank
it.
you, Abby. Nailed it. Good
Right at
job.
the end.
Yay!
Now, did you say how much the microbusiness application fees are? How much they cost?
It's $1,500. It is subject to the consumer price index, but for this first round, it'll be $1,500.
And you get that back if you don't win a license?
They can apply to have a refund as long as they don't have a pending appeal. So any kind of litigation or something that somebody might try to do or choose to do, as long as they don't have something like that pending, they can get a refund of their license or of their application fee.
Thank you, because in 2018, it was $10,000 non-refundable application fee for the lottery. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Abby right now?
I had one question, or maybe I missed it. What's the annual fee to maintain your license?
So for the first year, it's the $1,500 for this first round.
Right.
As I mentioned, it'll be subject to the consumer price index.
Okay, all right.
And that those change with fiscal year. So like July 1st next year is when we would start applying those, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Abby.
Myself,
Please.
I have a question.
Oh,
When we're talking about unaccredited school districts, what you had on that last slide, there's not a lot of those in the state of Missouri. So I see that as a benefit, good and bad, but it's not a lot of unaccredited school districts in the state of Missouri.
So I
how would that-
haven't, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Well, I
No, I was
haven't got
just
the
trying to
list
figure out
from
the
DESE
plus.
yet. They're going to provide us that. And so if you've graduated, it will be historical. Now, I do understand that I can't remember if it was 20 or 30 years ago that they said that the accreditation thing kind of wasn't a thing. And so for people that graduated potentially, before that, and there wasn't an accreditation process, I don't know that there's anything that really we can do about that. So the way the amendment was written, we're kind of just trying to do the best that we can to fill in those pieces. So like the incarceration rate, since there's not just like, you can't go look that up on Department of Corrections website. So providing that information or anything that requires some extra legwork, we're trying to make sure that we've done that for people to make that process easier for them.
Now, Abby, also know that you're charged with contacting people within the community, some leaderships as kind of like a
Yes.
conduit to community, underserved communities. And I'm looking at the participation list. We have Miguel and Carla Alexander on the call. So if any of those, and they are in charge of the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood organization that's for public health and safety in public schools and businesses. So Mr. and Mrs. Alexander, if you want to put your chat information, your contact information in the chat to Abby, that would be helpful. So again, I was
That would
hoping
be great.
we could get more people to support her in her activities and her charge and her constitutionally driven deadlines. We can give her more people to contact for education and technological seminars.
And I think, Susan, when we spoke previously, I kind of talked about this. We're not trying to underestimate, anybody who's applying for a micro license, but definitely want to make sure that we provide as many resources as we can to help that process be smoother, easier, more efficient, whatever we can do to help. But we're definitely not saying that we don't think that people aren't capable. But again, just want to make sure that what we can do to help that process along.
Thank you. Do you want to unshare your screen?
I will.
So the next person that's going to speak with us today is Dr. Alan Green. When we talked with Illinois, last year we talked with Oklahoma, Illinois, and Missouri to understand the challenges of legalized marijuana. And Illinois said that, people come out of prison or they have these criminal records, they have these felons, and the community doesn't want to accept them, nor do the municipalities that receive funding and can support these businesses, because they feel like, the communities feel like, once you're a criminal, you're a criminal. And some of the rejection is based on their past records. So I was hoping Dr. Alan Green would help us normalize cannabis and marijuana businesses so that we are not resisting it based on previous misconceptions. So Dr. Green.
This is quite interesting when we talk about marijuana, because I can look at it many different ways. One, as a former legislator, when this policy was passed, I sat on the Department of the Committee for Economic Development and voted in favor of this. So that's one angle. But then many years ago, I had a chance to also manage a federal alcohol and drug program for the nation. And there was a pilot program that had basically 5 cities in it: Harlem, New York, Tampa Bay, Florida, Oakland, California, Kansas City, and St. Louis. And I handled St. Louis for the nation. And we did a pilot program on drugs and alcohol, and I saw the ramifications of drugs, alcohol, but we got a chance to work with the entire families. So I knew this piece is so important when we're talking about incarcerations, because we were going inside the jails and bringing people back out and working with the families. But going back to the business aspect of it, which we're talking about today, one of the things that I'm always looking at, and you mentioned when we first started, is follow the money. And I'll say it again, follow the money. And how this is going to be, especially in minority communities, how it's going to impact them, how it's going to serve them, and what can be done to move these neighborhoods forward, which is very powerful. Because when you look at these congressional districts, or as you had up there, again, those the data that talked about the school districts that were unaccredited, a lot of those are minority communities. And so that's why I asked that question, because again, how would it benefit? How would it move these communities forward? Which is so very important. As a legislator, when the first policy was coming out on the marijuana, I remember writing endorsement letters, recommendation letters to those that were bidding on and trying to get those licenses, which was so important. And I remember about 3 or 4 of them that I wrote letters for, got it. Even one of the labs received a license across the state. So these are very, very important things that will help move our community forwards, because again, with this policy, we're talking about generational wealth too.
Mhm.
So that is so important when we're talking about low-income communities. How do you take this money now and move it toward the next generation and the next generation, which is so important, which we don't get a lot of times the opportunities to do those kind of things. But you also mentioned the criminal justice system and getting, this and getting it off the records of those that again fell in the system. And I've received letters after letters after letters saying, how do I work through the system to make that happen? And you already mentioned in your presentation earlier that our system, especially our technology system across the state, is not set up to right now handle all of that. But that is so very important too, especially in minority communities, that we need to be able to handle that data and make sure that people don't fall through the cracks again. But I'd like to take some questions because I can go on and on and on this subject.
So, you work with the Minority Business Development Agency. And so are you seeing any cannabis growers, processors coming through, looking for help in the development agency?
No, we haven't, because usually what we're working with is $1 million and above. And so those that are $1 million and above right now does not fall into this criteria. So I'm not seeing any of that, no.
Again, you mentioned, as a clergy, you're talking about you've worked in addictive settings before. And so sometimes we've had a conversation about this before within the Green Party about the addictiveness of marijuana. And is that the reason it's been so demonized? Or is it, in your opinion or observation, more what the numbers show against communities of color and countercultural individuals?
Well, one of the things that we have to go back and look at the history of this thing. Some of the people that I work with say, Alan, you talk about history too much, but we have to look at the history of this and how it occurred. Before Prohibition, marijuana, just like alcohol, was actually legal in the United States. And then after Prohibition, they made it illegal. And then the mob actually had control over this marijuana in the system here in the United States. And so when we had it, again, when it was legal with alcohol and also marijuana, we didn't have these difficulties and problems. But we've gone through now many different generations from Prohibition, now talking about up to the time we're legalizing it now, that people have been incarcerated. They've gone in and kicked in doors. They've gone in and with traffic stops, they've gone in and they put people behind bars for 20, 30 years or more, because of, saying, quote unquote, it's illegal and it's gone through the criminal justice system. But that is one of the things that especially in the minority community, got hit the hardest. And when you look at who usually in the criminal justice system get hit the hardest, is the minority community. They get caught, they don't have the money for the attorneys, they don't have money to make sure that they can get out or get on probation and parole. They don't have the money to take care of all of that. And so many have fallen through the cracks. And so one of the things that we looked at, again, many, many years ago when I was managing drugs and alcohol program, is again, the families and how it affects the families and the neighborhoods and where you come from, and the environment. The environment is so important when we talk about these issues and more. Now going back up to the business part of this thing, this is going to actually help create wealth within our community across the state of Missouri. This is going to be something that's going to be a game changer. We're talking about generational wealth that will be created from this product here, which is something that we really have to look at and something that is very valuable. And so what's the next question? Because I love this subject. Are you muted?
This is Barb. I have a question. Do you think that, it seems like it's kind of a steep fee to get into the business. Do you think that that's going to be a barrier for people to start a business?
What part of it again? I missed that part when you first started talking.
Oh, so it seems like a fairly steep fee to get the initial license. what did you say, Susan, $1,500 or, and do you think that's gonna be a barrier to people, to some people to actually to participate?
Well, I think that the 1,500 is not gonna be that bad. When at first they wanted you to have like 250,000 to get into this, and like who's walking around with $250,000, you know, to use the seed money to get in these businesses. So it's come down a tremendous amount when we're talking about $1,500, because that's one of the things that we used to argue on the floor, that who in the world, especially in the minority community, unless you are a drug dealer, is going to be able to afford to get into this marketplace. So these are the kind of things that over the period of time we have argued to get this down to a reasonable cost. And the reasonable cost right now from 250 to 1,500 is really reasonable.
And then as timekeeper, I have to remind you, you have 3 minutes.
So I went ahead and shared some of the incarceration records while Dr. Green was speaking. And so again, we're one of the highest incarcerated states, and I'll go back, I'll bring them back up again. One of the highest incarcerated states in the nation, where we incarcerate 735 Missourians for every 100,000 population. That's, our incarceration rates are over the top. So one of my hopes, and I think we should continue to track this, is how we stop vacuuming up communities of people and putting them in jail. Like, you know, again, look at the Missouri incarceration rate by race and ethnicity. This is a 2010 number, 2.3K Black people per 100,000, and then in 0.6, I mean, you know, 600 for Native Americans, and then Hispanic and Native American numbers pretty much the same. And white is 495 incarcerated white people per 100,000 white people in the state. So it's pretty obvious that it's tilted against people of color. And here we have in state prisons, local jails, on probation, federal prisons, and paroles. And everything I'm reading pretty much says that 40% of this is drug related. So, you know, the numbers that come up in the newspaper say 9,000. My calculations are more like 18,000. So it's going to be interesting. And then the Missouri State Highway Patrol currently tracks crimes in Missouri. And again, I'm expecting a decrease. They're going to publish marijuana offenses reports, but drug and narcotic violations compared to 2022, we're down 83%. And again, I'm not sure that's for the entire year or what, but even the numbers seem to start at 2020. But if we can keep bringing them down based on the reduction in drug arrests, nonviolent marijuana arrests. So again, it shows how many of these are marijuana in blue. What I learned, and Barb and I were at the same seminar, is that the voters wrote it, we won it, but we need to stay engaged with our regulators to make sure those constitutional numbers are met. Very promising. Okay, timekeeper, how are we doing?
Okay, we have 19 seconds left.
Dr. Green.
Great information. I mean, this is what I'm most excited about, is bringing down those incarceration rates, frankly. I'm really excited about that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Dr. Green, what do you think as far as, so the application fee has gone down, but still just the upfront investment to get these businesses going is pretty substantial, especially, you know, with all of the like security concerns and things like that. And so predatory lending is something that I have concern about, and something that I want to make sure that, you know, we're educating people about. So are there avenues or places that you think that these people are going to turn to try and get that capital in order to get their business going?
Well, that's something that we can help in, because that's what I concentrate on with the Missouri Minority Business Development Agency, which is funded by the Commerce Department. I handle the bonding and financing of companies. And so that is something that if you need help in that area, we could help in that area. because I'm working with banks and investors and hedge funds and others, again, that bring capital to the table. Again, but it's good proposals that they're looking for. Like today, I was looking at a company, actually, a consultant firm, basically, and they grew in 3 years from $0 to $6 million. But now they're running in the red instead of the black. And I was trying to work with some banks because they have about 3 or 4 contracts coming in. So I do this on a daily basis, working with companies and looking at their performance and their executive summaries, trying to, again, give them access to capital. And then a lot of times when we talk about these kind of things too, you talk about bonding. A lot of these facilities want a bond put up, or even the labs want a bond put in place to make sure that for security reasons, everything is going to be crossed from A to Z. And so maybe you have to have a bond in place besides to cover the liability of what's going to happen with these facilities. So I work with the bond and insurance companies too, and a lot of these different things. So yes, the MBDA could help in those areas if asked. But again, I would have to take this back and get permission, because again, this is part of the federal government that I work for.
All right.
And
Yeah.
as timekeeper, Susan and Mr. Green, your time is up. We may want to continue the conversation.
Okay, we will definitely continue the conversation, but let's talk to a grower. Hold on a minute. We're going to go back. So Mitch Pearson is the owner of Phi Global Farms, and their mission is end poverty and promote health and wellness. So Mitch Pearson, you want to talk to us a little bit about growing, urban farming, and what you would anticipate the ease of growing marijuana?
Yeah, good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the founder of Phi Global Farms. It's up in Spanish Lake, and we don't grow marijuana at this point. We'll make that clear.
Mhm.
And we work in the community. We work at community gardens, and we also teach people how to grow food. But my main interest in marijuana, I'm trying to balance if it's feasible to go the medical marijuana recreational route, or actually the hemp route. And I've been looking at things for a long time, trying to figure out the most feasible way to go generational with this, so I can pass this on to my children. I started looking at marijuana, thinking about it, about 10th grade. How I stumbled on that is I found a joint at school. And so on the way home, I smoked it, right? Just curious. And it went on from that to like reading High Times magazine and just doing research. I love to find out facts. And I found out through High Times that canvas, which was made for ships and all that rope, that was all hemp at one point in time, 1800s, that nature. I also found out that Missouri was the second leading producer of hemp in America behind Kentucky.
Mhm.
I know that both of those were slave states, and marijuana was a high labor production crop. So that I put those two things together. I found out that marijuana, or hemp, the hemp oil, you could burn it in lamps and automobiles. I found out that Henry Ford once made a car out of hemp. I know that. That's out there as a fact. And then you got the madness in the whole prohibition, reefer madness and all that. And the high incarceration rates for people, friends my age, who are going to jail for years because they possess marijuana. So as we go along this path with this whole new revolution for marijuana, how as a Black farmer, and I know those rejection rates are high across the board to get into the system, what is the best bet for a Black farmer to get involved in this whole industry? And in line with what's going on with Black farmers in general, we have a high rejection rate in anything agriculture. You know, if you look at the Pickford versus USDA lawsuit, that was a huge deal trying to at least bring attention to Black farmers losing land through the USDA. Actually, it was actually proven that they were doing things like throwing our applications in the trash can or waiting until like the end of the growing season to give us seed. You know, that's historically documented. So again, you know, I know this presentation is more on the side of marijuana, you know, medical and also recreational. But what about the other side? What about the hemp part of it? And how do we make a business out of that as Black farmers or minority farmers in general, but Black farmers in particular?
There's a question.
You know,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Abby, is that, I mean, the hemp part, is that part of your scope of responsibility?
So we don't regulate hemp. That was falling under the Missouri Department of Ag, but they turned it back over to USDA in January of this year. So I was still at Ag then, and they were seeing quite a decline in the number of hemp farmers in Missouri.
Was there any reason, any particular reason?
Generally, the things that I heard was because there wasn't a clear market for it, and AFCO, that regulates pet food and animal feed, they have not recommended hemp as an ingredient animal feed, but I know that there's lots of discussion circling around that. And I think if that happens where they start recommending that, I think that there would probably be a market for it at that point. But that's part of it. And then with the interstate, you know, transport, I don't know that there was a ton of issues, but that was a concern for some people. But I think a lot of it was that there just wasn't a clear market for the product at that time. So I think part of it would be having, you know, a manufacturer in Missouri or in the Midwest or something that was, you know, going to be buying that product that somebody could grow for them.
I'm going to share the current list of growers, if you guys don't mind. And again, Abby shared this with me. These are the current list of growers. And again, I don't know if you're responsible to finding out which ones are disadvantaged and which ones are in the right zip code. That's part of your responsibility going forward, Abby.
Mine would only be for the new applicants for the micro businesses. Currently, we don't collect any kind of demographic information for people that have licenses. It's something we've kind of talked about, you know, moving forward to kind of see where we're at. But right now, it's just you know, micro businesses and making sure they're eligible, and we don't necessarily collect any demographic information for those people either.
Right. So the cultivators, that's a micro business also. The growers.
So they can apply to be a wholesale, which encompasses cultivation or manufacturing. So taking marijuana, extracting and turning it into products, or they can get a dispensary license just to sell the products.
But no growers. Okay.
Well, cultivation. So I don't know why they use different nomenclature, but they rolled a cultivation into as a wholesale license, just what it's called.
Okay. Thank you. That's a big difference. That's important clarification. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mitch. I'm sorry.
No, those are my questions. I see the list there, but I would like to see more emphasis put on that other side, because I think that's a market, even though they say that there's no demand for it. You know, I'm looking at it in terms of like fiber, like cotton. There's a big demand for that. Why not, you know, think about using hemp as not a replacement, but as an additive to maybe cotton products. I don't know. And you talked about having facilities to process hemp. And I don't know where to go to look for those to see who's actually processing, which states are doing that, how much, all that information. That's kind of a question to Abby, I guess. I would.
Yeah, I was like, I think that's a question for me. No, I don't know specifically where to go to find that information. I know that since USDA does collect information on who's doing hemp, you might be able to find it on their website potentially, or maybe link to other states' websites where then you could find information from them.
Okay.
Okay, this is Barb. You have about 2 minutes left, Mitch, and I have a question, but I can wait to make it during comments, or I can ask it now.
Now's a good time. This
Okay.
is, I think,
So
yeah.
this has been my worry about all of this, because I do follow to some extent agriculture and big ag. And
Sure.
I'm really concerned that, marijuana is enormously popular and there's a lot of money to be made. And I guess my concern is that it's going to turn into another monocrop, like what we're seeing in Missouri with soybeans and corn and so on. And the use of pesticides and the overuse of watering of a plant that actually on its own does fairly well. So I don't know if you had any thoughts about that, Mitch.
Well, generally speaking, we're agriculture. It's a mess.
It is a mess,
we've got,
yes.
we've got a lot of big corporations out there who are, for example, if you are a family farmer and you've got, say, a couple of thousand acres, you've had it in your farm, your family for a couple of generations, you got corporations coming out, buying 10,000 acres, they've got all the means to really just grind the market. And we're losing a lot of farm families. And my big concern is, as we lose these farm families and we get these giant corporations controlling agriculture, that's going to really push us into more servitude more than citizenship, if you follow what I mean.
Right.
I think we're
that's
in
my worry.
antitrust. We're in an antitrust position now. And we got to fight now, because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves without land, without means to produce our culture, all the above. It's a fight, but we got to get that word out there and start get folks to pay attention to what's really going on.
Thank
Like
you.
who's got all this land, who's buying it, what's going on with it. We talked about the big meat producers earlier before we started, and that's a big, but it's a lot. Like we found out during COVID that it was 4 big corporations that controlled 80% of the meat production, and that's highly dangerous.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're fighting, to try to bring more people into agriculture, small and large farms, so we can balance this thing out, so we can have a better system of equity out there.
Thank you. And with that, your time's up. But it's a great conversation. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Now we have time for comments. Commenters have 2 minutes each, and so I'll raise your hand, put up a share, or just raise your hand if we can see you. We'll call on you. Okay, I think we've answered all the questions. Erica Clark, do you have any question? All right, I guess everyone cleared it up beautifully. But I do want to say, again, I'll keep looking, but with this wonderful opportunity to be around, oops, just a minute, so many states that did not win the right to recreational marijuana, because I know Oklahoma didn't make the ballot, they didn't get the signatures. It failed in Arkansas. We were very fortunate, in addition to minimizing the stress on our penal system. That's the first thing Oklahoma said when they got the medical marijuana. Their jails weren't filling up like they were before. So we're very fortunate to be touching 8 states, with only one of them being recreational, and we beat them on price. And keep in mind that the state sales tax is 6%, but each city went through and voted for 3% sales tax. I know University City was able to win their sales tax bid, and I know Don, you're opposed to it, but they say it goes to public safety and youth drug education programs. Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up into any questions. We got 2 more chats. Sue, do you want to speak your question or comment?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sue Edward. I'm in the Kansas City area. And in the April election, 2 of the local counties, Jackson County, which is the largest with Kansas City, Cass County, passed a 3% sales tax on recreational. It does not affect medicinal. A lot of the local cities as well. So Kansas City and Grandview and Raytown and you name it, a whole host of cities passed an additional 3%. So someone potentially could go to a dispensary in Kansas City and pay a 12% tax when you add up state, county, local, but go the other side of the river to North Kansas City where they did not have those and only pay the 6% state tax. So there is some inequities there, and that may drive where people actually do their shopping.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks very much. Do we have someone else who wants to make a comment or? All right, any final words from Dr. Green? Any final words from Abby? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Green.
I just wanted to say it has been an honor to talk about this subject right here, since I think the entire nation is going to take this subject up. Half the nation already is looking at it and has passed legislation in this area. And when we're talking about revenue, this is a key component. Again, we look at over the years how many people have been incarcerated because of this. And now we can legalize this, and then the federal government gets a chance to get that revenue. This is a positive. And I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Mitch Pearson, any final words?
I would like to encourage everyone that's on here and tell your friends and to pay attention to what's going on in agriculture, particularly with the corporate takeovers of farmland in America, because I'm concerned. And it affects both sides of the equation, both the urban side and the rural side. And we're just trying to figure out ways to communicate and connect to make sure that people are engaged with other farmers, getting your food locally, looking at how your chicken is grown, where it's coming from, all the above. It's important. And I think it's our key to democracy is to control, food is one big one. So, but I don't want to stay on my soapbox, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitch. And Abby, final words from you, please.
Thank you guys for having me. And Mitch, you and I need to connect to talk about farming. And Alan, I would like to connect with you to see if there's some ways that we can work together, for microbusiness education. And if there's anybody that's on that you think it would be beneficial in your communities to have, somebody come out, myself, or come out and speak, please let me know, reach out and connect, because that's how I think we'll make this whole eligibility successful. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Now I've got one more note that Jerome wants to say something today. Do we have him on the phone, Joe?
Yes.
Go ahead, Joe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. When we legalize cannabis, I will not be a user. How many times have I said that?
You don't have to.
Now that it is legal, both medical and recreational here in Missouri, I'm still not a user, and here's why. When I was age 16, I almost went blind in both eyes due to an extremely rare form of glaucoma. My pressure was sky high, and I was on the entire legal pharmacopoeia with extremely unpleasant side effects. I asked my doctor, isn't it true that THC can help reduce intraocular pressure? Isn't there a legal eye drop called Marinol, which you can use to reduce pressure? And my doctor replied, not THC, cannabis. cannabis is an herb, not a drug. It's actually a genus of herbs: cannabis indica, cannabis sativa, a number of other varieties, with at least 20. Now we know at least 20 chemicals called cannabinoids, which bind with receptors in the human body. And now we know that at least 4 of them, especially THC and CBD, have medical uses. At that time, they didn't really know any better, so they made this eye drop, which was completely worthless for glaucoma. But just putting THC on your eye didn't do anybody any good. I have a brother in Montana who, some 20 years ago, had a cannabis prescription for his glaucoma. The prescription was written by the last person on earth who I would imagine would ever write a pot prescription for anybody. This very conservative Seventh-day Adventist who had Bible tracts in his waiting room, and but everything else that my brother was given was not doing him any good. So he thought, well, let's give this a try, and it worked. Unfortunately, my brother had to be taken off of cannabis because it was messing with his mental health. He has schizoaffective disorder. Now, 20 years later, he's back on with a medical prescription code in Montana, but only for CBD, because now they know that it's CBD, not THC, which is good for glaucoma. In 2016, I had a big problem with my right eye. My eye pressure went sky high, and I was on the entire legal pharmacopoeia with extremely unpleasant side effects. And I made a half-hearted attempt to procure some illegal cannabis. If I had persisted, it's quite possible that I would still have the use of my right eye. I'm blind in my right eye, almost blind in my left eye. My life might be very different had cannabis been legal and had they really been able to do the right research on it and make it available as a medical treatment. Now that it is legal here in Missouri, I'm still not a user, and here's why. The damage from glaucoma is done and can't be undone. I might use CBD for something else, but as for THC, I'm not schizophrenic or schizoaffective, but my brother is, and people with a family history of schizophrenia or anything on that continuum are advised not to use it. For my own part, I've never been tempted to use psychoactive drugs. I prefer yoga and meditation and breath control, but to each his own. We should know by now that prohibition does not work. Harm reduction is best.
Mm-hmm.
When we legalize it at the federal level and deschedule it, then I hope we can have cannabis products labeled for the THC and CBD content, and also a health advisory for family members of schizophrenics and people with schizoaffective disorder, because it can be dangerous for some people. But once again, harm reduction is best. Prohibition never works. And
Yeah, Jerome,
so I guess that's my story. And,
Yeah.
Jerome, thank you very much. Digger has his hand up. Digger?
Okay, thanks for that, Jerome. Yeah, and I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But it goes, first of all, everyone realizes that the terms hemp, marijuana, THC, CD, it's all one plant. It's all the cannabis plant. Yes. And I just wanted to say again that the term marijuana was used, it's an archaic term that was used to demonize Latino people in the 30s. A lot of farmers were growing hemp, so they had to come up with a new name to demonize them, say, oh, all these Mexicans high on marijuana. The term marijuana is also a relic of the war on drugs. It should be abandoned. Now, some people are going to use it. I'm not saying we should police people's language, but in official things like, the government person we saw, it's Department of Cannabis Regulation. This is the term we should be using. It's a scientific term. It's not an archaic, outdated, with racist implications in the drug war term. And I would urge everyone to say cannabis, especially on green, official green dispatches. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Digger. Perfect. All right, any other questions? We're at an hour and a minute. Let's keep tracking this and let's support Abby in her endeavors. Good job, everyone. Barb, any questions or comments? Barb Shapiro, Don Fitz.
I think I raised my big concern, and Mitch eloquently responded about the intrusion of big ag into the farming of cannabis. And I still carry that worry in my heart. And that's something that I think we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this evening. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Great program. Thank you.
Thank you.